So let's just go around and just briefly introduce ourselves and stuff, and then we'll start with a laser learn workshop here. So let's go alphabetical. So it'll be A B. So Alex, you go first, then Brian, and then Steve, and then I'll wrap up.
Awesome. Hello, gentlemen. I'm Alex, 29 years old, was brought up in London. Bit of a diverse background. My dad's Spanish, my mum's Welsh, and I am a chosen Australian right now. And as Noble once shared, I'm a global citizen. So, yeah, I love connecting with people, understanding people. I'm in the software recruitment business for trading my time for money at the moment. And yeah, I'm just mad into learning. I love learning, and so that's why I'm here, just gain knowledge of other experts in their own field and their own life.
And you've also done fighting, right? Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I've had a cage fight, and I've done Muay Thai since I was 17 years old. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on and off for a little while now. But yeah.
And then he's got the gangster beard to boot. So that's awesome. Thanks, Alex. All right, Brian.
I would, for those that are watching this after the fact, the order was selected at random. I would never have chosen to follow Alex, knowing that like I was going to follow the most interesting man in the world. But here goes. A little more boring. I'm a little north of 29 years old. I just turned 31 last month. I'm an Army officer and currently in grad school for a master's in social and organizational psychology, which I'll touch on a little bit of that during my laser workshop. This graduate degree is sort of pursuant to a teaching position at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So we just moved up here from South Carolina a couple months ago. My wife, my two sons, Jackson and James, and we're getting ready to take on that responsibility.
All right, my name's Steve Norman, and since you guys are sharing your age, I guess I'm obligated to share mine. I'm actually 39, so in February will be the big 40, so you guys are like babies. But you feel the same at 39 as you do when you're 29 and 31, so not much has changed in that department. But so my background, I was actually a phys ed major in college. I thought I was going to teach phys ed and coach football. That was kind of my vision. But my senior year, I decided I wasn't sure about that and just took a year off and never went back. Ended up landed in DOD for just kind of my 9-to-5 job. And so I have 2 kids, a son and a daughter, 5 and 3. And about 4 years ago, my wife and I learned about ways to kind of create online business and advertise online, and learned a little bit about that and dove into that. And so that's kind of what I'll be sharing a little bit about.
Awesome. Okay, and then my name's Noble, and started the 360 Movement Personal Growth Tribe maybe a few years ago. Have done a lot of seminars and stuff as part of that group and within that group. And you can find a lot of those seminars, probably not all of them, but a lot of them, if you search for in that group #keynote, one word, #keynote, and then there'll be a Google document that you can click on, and it'll have a lot of links to some of the phenomenal workshops and stuff that we've had. So this is new. Like Alex, I love learning, and hopefully we'll have more people that will contribute, and maybe we can start doing this maybe more frequently or something, because I love learning, and I don't care what it is. Like, it could be, in fact, a guy at church yesterday taught me, he's a special forces guy. He taught me, man, probably about a 20-30 minute class on beef. So I had no idea. He has 17 Texas Longhorns here in Colorado. I had no idea. Like, I see the little pictures and I, see them, look, but dude, their wingspan on their horns are massive. And so he and his family, they homeschool. He and his family butchered a cow, and one of their steers. And I'm like, dude, how long, and I, from a homeschool perspective, I'm like, man, you've got biology in there, you've got science, you've got math, you've got economics. Like, there's so many different subjects that you can glean from, life and death, but it still serves a purpose. And I said, how long does one, cow feed your family? And he said, dude, probably a whole year. So an entire year for one steer. And then he says, typically my family lives off of one steer and 2 pigs for the whole year. And he's got like 3 kids, 3 or 4 kids, and his wife and stuff. And it was just fascinating. Man, he was telling me the difference between Angus and Kobe, and anyway, fascinating. Okay, so I've got my trusty dusty iPhone watch here to keep me on track. So I'll go first. So I'm gonna be talking about the safe handling of boom, what? A weapon. All right. So and I want to show you some of these things here. Okay, so if you look closely, I have a trusty taco holster. Oh yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh yeah, don't hate, celebrate. All right. So that is my tactical concealed carry holster there. Now, I will also tell you that holsters is a whole nother class. That's literally a whole nother class, because they have inside the waistband, which this is inside. You'll see it termed as IWB, inside waistband, or OWB, outside the waistband carry. And different states in the U.S. have different, everyone is different laws, that kind of thing. There's something called reciprocity, that some states will have reciprocity based on, hey, if you get certified in North Carolina, that will cover you reciprocity in 20 other states or 40 other states or whatever, right? So every state is different. Okay, a couple principles when handling a weapon. Number one is you always have to assume that it's loaded. Always assume it's loaded, even if it's not. Always assume it's loaded. And make sure that if you do have any firearms in your house, that you make sure that's a principle that everyone in your house, including and especially children, know that anytime you see a weapon, assume that it's loaded. And leads me to the next thing is, it's what we tell our daughter: the only time you put your finger on the trigger is at the range, when it's on a target, or it's pointed at a bad guy. Under no other circumstances do you push your finger on the trigger, right? So unless you're clearing it, which I'll show you how to do here in just a second. But again, it's a very, very, you treat this very seriously. So the first thing I do is I clear the weapon. So there's and you also, one of the other principles, you always want to pay attention to the muzzle, the direction of the muzzle. What direction is the muzzle facing? Always hypersensitive. Even is it pointing at your foot? Is it, when I'm doing this, is it pointing at my face, right? Those are all big safety violations. So you always make sure you understand the direction of the muzzle. Okay, on the side, this is a Glock. This is called a Glock 19, which is a full-size 9mm weapon. It's called a magazine release. There's a magazine, it's a little button right here on the side here. I push this button and it drops the magazine. Now, this has hollow point rounds. That's a whole nother lesson, but you can see it's a kind of an indented in that round right there. So we call it 9-ball full metal jacket is what you use to go to the range with. This is for home defense, because a hollow point round will kind of splash when it hits the target versus go through it. You want it to do more damage in home defense. Plus, if you're having a small house, we kind of live in a small house. I don't want it to go through 5 walls. I don't want it to go outside my house and hit a neighbor accidentally, right? Now, so now I dropped the magazine with that little magazine button right there. So then the next thing I do, I'm gonna just flip this around here, is I open it. And there's a way to do that. So there's got the bolt catch here. When I pull this back, I lift this up, this bolt catch up, so it catches, and now it's locked to the rear. So now you do an inspection. You check, it's a three-point inspection. You check at the entrance of the bolt there. I mean of the barrel, the entrance of the barrel, to see if there's a round that may be stuck in there. You check in this main port as well, and then you look through the magazine well to make sure there's no round inside that had maybe fallen inside the magazine well. So it's a 3-point check to clear it. Now, for safety purposes, the other thing that I like to do is when I clear it, I like to pull the charging handle back 3 or 4 times to make sure that there is no round in there. And then, and only then, I will pull the trigger to make sure, again, that it's, and I want, even when I pull that trigger, I make sure it's pointing down and away so that there's no, there's no safety violation there just in case. And then I'll put the magazine back in. So when I, and this is just personal preference now, when I'm at home, I will, when I'm at home, I will not keep a round in the chamber when I'm at home, personally. And there's some thoughts behind that. I'm out of time here. I just hit my 5 minutes. So personally, when I'm at home, I leave it unloaded. I mean, I have it, the magazine in, but I don't have a round in the chamber. When I leave the house, I will put a round in the chamber. So, okay. A resource. There's a resource I'm going to recommend you guys. It's called Active Self-Protection. If you go to the YouTube channel, Active Self-Protection, they have this guy, I think he's a retired cop, has hundreds and hundreds of real videos, real footage of people that carry or don't carry and the consequences thereof, that know how to handle a weapon, don't know how to handle a weapon. And that is and he's also Instagram as well, Active Self-Protection on Instagram and YouTube. All right, that's it. My class is over on proper handling of a gun, of a handgun, of a pistol. Okay, Alex, we'll go with you next, brother.
Awesome. Thanks for that. That was I've never seen such detail, so I loved it. So thank you very much. I'm just setting an alarm as well.
And you guys can't have guns in Australia, right?
No, it's they made it a law, I think, after a shooting many years ago. So it's just the police that have guns over here.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
And
right.
in the UK, only like drug dealers, like the police have tasers and like bats and stuff. So yeah, that was awesome.
Wow, good.
So yeah, for my chat, like just finished doing some great learning with Noble, and it was a whole book study, and we were talking about the masculinity. So I thought I could share about throwing a punch, because obviously that's your own energy, it's your own defense. Like it's like having your own gun, but your 2 hands. And so I was trying to think of a good analogy that I could give everyone, because one of the most important things is actually your footwork. Which is I'm going to show you. So like, is anyone a right-hander here? Like raise your hand if you're right-handed. Okay, cool. So you would all be orthodox. If you're left-handed, you'd be southpaw, which is like a different lesson. A good analogy though is to think of a tree. So when you look at the big branches and the beautiful leaves and everything, you know that it's got a good root work system. And so it's the same with if you go to play golf. Would you use a putter when you're trying to drive it, or would you use a driver? And so a lot of people actually get confused when they're trying to throw a punch, that they'll be throwing these things called haymakers, when in actual fact you want to be throwing a jab, which is more of, so because you're with your left foot, I'll show you my footwork in a minute. So you'd be throwing more with your left first, and that's just to find your reach. So when you see 2 people confronting each other, they're always going like this, and you can see it coming a mile off, whereas actually your power will come from the 2, which is the 1, 2. And so it will always be you understanding how far away the person is. But I wanted to show you my footwork, so I don't know if there's cameras you can see. So you can see that your stance is like your left foot faces forward and your right foot is like 45 degrees. So you can see here, when you shuffle in, you're actually going like this. You never ever cross over, because if you cross over, someone can hit you and you fall off. Whereas you're going forward, you're going backwards. But obviously when you're out just doing self-defense, you might forget all of this. But whereas if you stand like that, you can easily go back. So that's why it's a strong dominant leg with your left leg, and you go forward. And then that's where your left would come in, and then your right. So like you're always just 1, 2, 1, 2, because what you're doing is you're finding your distance and your score. And another thing that you might not know is that your power actually comes from your back. It doesn't come from your biceps or anything. So when you're throwing a punch, you're actually fully connecting with your back. And so it's a 1, 2. And so this is like some things that I thought I could share just to, because some people might have a perception that it's like, we need to throw these big things, when in actual fact, if you see a guy ever and it gets into a confrontation, you can just jab him on the front of the face and then just throw another 2. And then you can get into the more complex, which are these big haymakers. But if you throw a haymaker, the other sees it coming a mile off. Whereas if you throw a analogy, if a shark comes at you, hit it in the nose. Like people, I do martial arts for self-defense, as I was brought up in London, and there's a lot of interesting people with very interesting items and objects and these types of things. So I find that your hands are like such a valuable tool that you can use, obviously for self-defense. But yeah, I'd love to leave you on your footwork. It's very important. So never crossing over, making that dominant, like moving forward, moving back. Your power actually comes from your back. So when you throw it, you can see it gets more complex, that you're actually guarding your face when you throw a punch, and it's like a shield. And yeah, do the 1, 2. So it'd be 1, 2. And then that's where the real power comes from. So that's where you can 1, 2, and then you can like throw uppercuts and hooks and all that. But just to find your reach, because a lot of people don't know reach, and that's why they'll always throw these big ones. But in actual fact, you can just throw 1, 2, and then that's like a really good basis to go from, that you can then throw hooks and uppercuts and stuff. So yeah, I hope that brought value to anyone. And yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Awesome, bro. Love it. Great class, man. That was awesome. That's great. All right, Big Brian. I think Big Brian's up.
I'm going to talk about Tuckman's stages of group development. So 1965, hang on one second. We've got a co-collaborator here that's trying to join in. Bruce Tuckman, 1965, had a theory. So again, I will preface this with, I am a grad school student. This is a theory. As the kids say, if it doesn't apply, let it fly. But the stages of group development are forming, storming, norming, and performing. I like to add one more on the end called adjourning, but again, we'll get to that. So the relevance here is, no matter what group you're in, church, Bible study, sports team, find a way to kind of step outside the group, look at yourself, look at the group, and see where that group is in these stages. And that's one of those things that will help you understand where the group is and what it needs to move to the next stage. Not every group's going to go through all these stages, and they may, regress at some point depending on things that happen. But first thing that happens is forming. A group will come together. They'll be given a common task, a common mission, whatever they come together for. People are largely focused on being on their own personal best behavior. And the next stage is thinking more about the group. So again, forming, people are generally focused on themselves in relation to the task at hand. Once the group has sort of de facto established some, I don't want to say norms, because that's like kind of what the, well, I guess it is norming. Okay. Yeah. So norming, sorry. Forming, once they're still forming, once they've established some norms personally, individually, that's when they'll start storming. And that's when you'll have interpersonal conflict. That's where you'll have disagreement. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. As an Army officer, I'll tell you, sometimes you get sort of tossed into a situation that's not necessarily functioning well. And those rough times are what is going to help the group bond through that stage. So that sort of shared strife, that shared conflict. So group is forming. Once they're sort of appropriately formed around the task, they'll begin storming a little bit. Again, some groups that are very well, working together, they'll cruise through that stage and they'll move on to norming. That's where the legitimate, I don't want to say like standards, but, again, to use the word norm, those norms are established. The group sort of agrees much more so in a deliberate sense. Those disagreements they had personally are resolved. Those personality clashes disappear. Once they've normed, now they can really start focusing not just on dissecting and learning about the task at hand, but actually doing that task at hand. And that's where they move on to the stage of performing. I've got about 2 minutes left, so I'll talk a little bit about performing, and then my personal favorite stage that Tuckman had nothing to do with, adjourning. When a group is, as we say, jiving, or they're in the zone, when you're working well together, that's when you're performing and you're doing whatever it is, that task that's sort of assigned to you. Where you will see groups, I believe, sort of regress or struggle is, again, especially in my work environment, people are often pulled from that group, rapidly with very little warning. And they're not given sort of the appropriate amount of time to grieve. Now, grieve not so much in a sense of like a legitimate sadness, although sometimes there is sadness when you leave a group, but sort of grieving your departure, grieving someone else's departure from that group. That group, though it's still maybe mostly formed, if an individual is gone, the group as we know it is over, and now there's sort of a new group. Now, with most of those pieces still in play, you may cruise through those stages. You may not spend a whole lot of time norming because most of the team is still here. But once that person is gone, it's very important, I believe, to appropriately adjourn the group. Grieve that person's loss, grieve the loss of the group. The group has effectively changed. But again, once it's gone, you can more readily, more deliberately pick those pieces back up, get everybody moving in the same direction again. Hey, we're really going to miss the outgoing commanding officer, but now we've got a new commanding officer. Let's make sure we bring them in appropriately and get the team moving again. So again, that's got about 30 seconds left. So I'll close here. Bruce Tuckman's stages of group development, forming, storming, norming, performing, and then my edition, the Girardi edition, adjourning. Again, a theory, maybe not one that works for you, but again, something to look at your groups that you're in, especially if you've got a malfunctioning group that you're in. They may be stuck in that storming stage, or they may have regressed back to a norming stage, but take a look at some of the groups you're in and think, where is this group right now? And then more importantly, look at yourself and think, what can I do to contribute to the group to maybe move it along, move it to a more effective stage. So yeah, I'm out of time. That's what we've got for today.
Bro, that was excellent. And I know all of us on here are all leaders, so I think that'll be applicable to all of us for sure. That's great, skinny man. Excellent, Brian. Thank you, bro. That was great. All right, Big Steve.
I'm going to talk about Facebook ads and marketing on Facebook. I know Noble and Kathy are entrepreneur magnets, and so everyone in their circle of influence is either an entrepreneur or thinking about it, or an expert in some field that they could go ahead and market. So I think Facebook marketing is an excellent place to do it. There's a lot of advantages to it. I'm going to go over a couple. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is kind of talk about a strategy that would be kind of seen as a negative, but I think is very important. So I would say before you are ready to launch into doing anything Facebook marketing, you need to have a good amount of money to get started with. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. I would recommend $800 to $1,000 more if you want to. But to do it right, from what I understand, just in the way I've done it and I've seen others do it, you're going to need to be able to test. So there's a joke in the industry that the answer to every question is test. So you could ask me a question, hey, Steve, would you recommend doing this or doing this? In most cases, I wouldn't even answer the question. I'd say you would need to test it. You need to do both and see, and the data will tell you which one is right. And because your audience might be totally different than my audience, your price point is going to be different than my price point. So there's a million other factors that would influence that, that could be totally different. Even if I told you, for me, it's definitely this, but for you, I would test it. And testing it costs money. That is just part of the process. And if you have the money set aside to begin with, you won't be like, man, I'm losing money here. You'd be like, I'm learning, and this is the first part of it. And so I know you're going to be much more relaxed about the process of testing and learning, which I did not do. I did not know that. So as we were launching our business and learning, I was working overtime to cover my failing ads as I was learning. But I knew I was learning, I just wasn't prepared up front. So I would work weekends to cover my failing ads. So yeah, that would be my huge recommendation as far as getting started, because then you can be relaxed, then you can not worry about, you know, I spent 10, 15 bucks on this ad and it didn't, and nothing happened. Then you know, if you have the money, you know that that's just part of the process. Now the value of Facebook ads, there's two main categories that no matter what your business, what you're trying to market, this can work for you. It's huge. So as you guys probably know, Facebook collects a truckload of information about you, whether you like it or not. I personally like it. Facebook actually tracks what you do offline. So if you Google search, you know, a certain product, like this recently happened for me, I like it. I was looking at gun lights, and then I'll get on Facebook and all of a sudden I've got ads for gun lights. Now, I personally like that because if I'm looking for something, I like getting hit with ads that are specific to me. Some people don't like that. Regardless, Facebook is learning about you all the time, your activity, what you do, and they basically apply it to their algorithms that when you're an advertiser, it uses to find the right people. So the main thing about Facebook is targeting. You can target by demographic. You could target by, you know, age, activity, what you like, you know, your interests. So the things that you're interested in. You can also target by your activity on Facebook. I can run an ad to people, like say within a certain group. If I was doing something sports related, I could pick different sports activities. And then within that audience, I could also select people that have clicked a call to action button in the last week. So anyone that has not done that would be excluded from my audience. So targeting is massive. You can target people that are currently in college. You can target people based on like all different kinds of activities. Now they've changed that over time. So there's been some adjustments to that, but there's a ton of targeting, and it's very useful for just, you know, most people know exactly that their avatar are exactly who they're trying to reach. And then within this huge pool of people on Facebook, it's like, well, how do I get this in front of the right people? Facebook has mastered that. And then with my last few seconds, the real value that Facebook has in targeting, and why it's worth saving that $1,000 or whatever it's got to be to really learn it, is Facebook does something called lookalike audiences. And what it does is it will take a certain action that you've developed through running your ads and find other people like it. So once you get a certain number of people, let's say 300, once you've had 300 people say add to cart in your store, or click a learn more button, or sign up for a newsletter, any of those things, you could tell Facebook, look at these 300 people and find other people like it. And for a lot of people, not everyone's business, but for a lot of people, that is hugely successful. And it's like, some people would say, try, you know, and the answer is test it. Try it with 100 people, try it with 200 people. Some people say 500 people. But once you get a certain action, whether it be add to cart, you know, clicking on a link, a purchase, and then you say, okay, now look at all these 500 people that bought from me and find more people like it. It's an amazing tool. It works really well, even better than their targeting. When you can get to that, over that hump, to be able to create a lookalike audience, you've got something going. And that's just a huge value for anyone marketing that's going to find people that are perfect for whatever you're marketing on there. And I don't know of other platforms that do that quite like that. And that's why Facebook is popular for marketing.
Awesome. Excellent, Skinny, man. Okay, so that concludes the formal 5-minute laser learn workshop. Okay, now I want to transition for those that want to, because I thought of questions for each of you that I was like, oh man, I'd like to, you know, what about this? What about that? What about this? Okay. So if you guys don't mind, let me, and if you guys have questions, great. If you don't have questions, that's fine too. But Brian, let me start with you. This may be, kind of MET-T, which is I'm sorry, guys, for Alex and Steve, that's a military term. What stage is the hardest of, forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning? I guess my fifth principle of patrolling would say, my common sense would say that storming is just by definition of maybe some inherent conflict, but I don't want to assume that. So what is the hardest stage is question number one. Question number two, what stage are you the best in? Like, do you have a particular stage where, okay, well, man, I'm the best at this stage? And then three, do you have any resources that we can go check out to learn more about that theory?
I have been getting laid into all semester with my PhD professors. There's a large group of us military officers that are in this program that are we lean towards those hard answers. We're like, hey, what is this? What is this? And they have been beating me up all semester with a phrase that I now have the perfect opportunity to lay on you guys. What is the hardest stage, Noble? It depends. What's tricky about these stages is depending on what your mission is and the individual personality dynamics within the group. Some of those stages can be difficult. Now, what I would offer is that some people would think, oh, storming has got to be really tough. If you are not controversial, if you are not comfortable with being uncomfortable, then storming can be a very difficult stage for you. But I would offer that folks that thrive in chaos, folks that like to, sort of see through to use, another sort of military term, the fog of war, to those that are okay with being a little confrontational, storming is a great place to be. You're in your element there. There are people that struggle very much in the performing stage or in the norming stage. So what I would say is the most difficult stage very much depends on your group and your individual dynamics. Which stage am I the best in? I would honestly say I like the storming stage the most. Largely for the reasons that I just shared. It may not be comfortable, it may not always be pretty, but as someone who suffers from ADD, the chaos is good. I don't want to be Ricky Bobby at the end of the race. I don't know what to do with my hands. No, if I've got something to do, then I'll work through it. I've got something chaotic, crazy to focus on. I prefer the storming stage, but again, that is a very uncomfortable place for some people to be. As far as other resources, I could fax you my textbooks. No, I was first exposed to this as a cadet. I was in my undergraduate introductory psychology course, and strange as it is to say, you learn a lot of things in college that may not necessarily apply to your job as an Army officer. I spent a lot of time talking about the stages of group development as a company commander. So I was in charge of 15 drill sergeants who tend to be very, very, I almost said squared away, but I'm trying to use a little bit of less military jargon, very high performing non-commissioned officers, junior leaders throughout their kind of military career. But a lot of times you put a group of high performing people together, then sometimes they're going to butt heads a little bit. I spent a lot of time talking to the group, talking to individuals, addressing issues related to our group development. We also had a very high rate of turnover, which is pretty typical in that type of organization. Drill sergeants only do their job for about 2 years, which means if you've only got 12 of them, every other month, statistically speaking, on average, you're losing somebody and gaining somebody else. Ridiculous rate of turnover once you annualize that. So, we spent a lot of time moving forward, regressing, one step forward, 2 steps back type thing. But again, as long as you kind of got your head up and as long as you understand, kind of why things are the way they are, it's very easy to move to and from those stages and not get stressed out about it and not be like, oh, why are we struggling right now? Well, you're struggling because you had 4 new guys show up and 4 people leave in the same month. The next 2 months are going to be tough. Don't stress about it. Work through it. So I didn't answer your last question. Let me do a little bit of a better job. Resources, you can find this on Wikipedia, and they dumb it down great. And then, like I said, just kind of work through it, try to map it out, look at your organizations, and just apply those stages to them, and you'll have your own little, 3x5 note card full of expertise.
That was great, Brian. I love the concept of understanding the purpose of each stage would make each stage a lot more effective, I think. So that was excellent. The other thing that I think for me, my other big takeaway is, I do the podcast EQ for Entrepreneurs, and emotional intelligence would greatly impact each one of those stages as well. Not only individual EQ, but the group EQ as well would definitely impact, how each of those stages go, right? If you've got a bunch of emotional 5-year-olds, you're going to have, it's going to be rough going probably in each stage. But if you have more emotionally mature folks, that's going to be a different experience. So that was great. Okay, Alex, for you, I have a couple questions. One is so exercise. Do you have any ideas or suggestions to increase speed? Like, hand speed. Are there any good exercises that you can think of, or that you know of, or that you do? And then what is the importance of, one of the things that I learned when I was in Taekwondo many moons ago was the importance of torso, right? The importance of that hip, putting your hip into it. Same with, and I've never done Muay Thai, but in Taekwondo, right? A lot of kicks in Taekwondo, same deal. The importance of getting that hip into that strike, whether it's a hand strike or leg strike, is also going to add. So not just the back, but also the torso. So any tips on in making sure that torso is involved, or have you, is torso important in Muay Thai? And then any recommended resources?
I would say for speed, definitely training. So like doing shadow boxing or whatever, I often hold weights in my hand and do weighted training, like even shuffling forward. I got a weighted vest, because I don't know if you've seen Dragon Ball Z, but they take off their like weighted vests and they train with like armor on and all of this. But yeah, for speed, that's why you got speed ropes as well. Skipping can help you not only for the lymph node glands, but there's a lot to it. Then there's other things like speed balls and these types of things. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. A lot comes from the hip, and that's where like if I did something on a hook, like that I'd show you it all comes from the hip and the turning of your Achilles heel out, and that's how you actually get the power. I just wanted to break some paradigms where people think that throwing a punch is with their bicep, but it actually comes, the powers from the back. But yeah, it all comes from the hip and the turning of the torso. And that's why, like, you'll see fighters' abs, they're not only armor, but it's from that spin movement. And that's also where your flow comes from, energy. So in Muay Thai, it's an art, it's Thai boxing. So anyone who doesn't know, it's you use your elbows and your knees. So there's another 4 points of contact for not only kicking, but punching. And so it's constantly a game of chess. So you're going up and you're going down, and you're just floating around the body trying to find holes in their armor. Same for jiu-jitsu, when people are on their back and trying to find these little pockets. And then it comes with, if you go over, you've got to come under, and it's just constantly moving like that. That's why you'll see like capoeira is a beautiful one in Brazil, and that's what the slaves used as a self-defense. And they looked like they were dancing, but it was actually to beat the people that had taken them. Some great places to, if you're thinking about getting into it. I'm not sure what American standards are like. I've trained all over the world, from UK, like my first trainers were world champions. Then I trained in New Zealand by the New Zealand champions, and I've trained over here in a few different places. But I would say going, like, if you want to get into it, just start on like a casual weekend class. They're normally quite welcoming, and people are all different ages, levels, and just don't be embarrassed, because the word success starts with the word suck, right? So you're going to suck at anything when you start, but it's one of the biggest confidence boosters that you can have. And it's the greatest feeling that you can walk around just going, I can defend myself, I know this. And then I would recommend, there's some great films out there, like one's called Ong Bak, and that's all about like a Thai guy. It's all in Thai. But yeah, some other resources, I'd say just similar: Wikipedia, Google, or like if you're into UFC, John Jones, he's a massive Thai boxer. So if you ever see spinning elbows and knees and stuff, that's all Thai boxing. Yeah, I hope that helps. And yeah.
Awesome, Alex. Thanks for joining us, brother. I know you got to run. Thanks a million, bro. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Okay, Steve, I just had a couple questions. One, was the 800 to $1,000, is that monthly or is that one time? And then how often do you test Facebook ads? Is like every ad you do, you test it, or once a month or once a week, kind of what's the industry standard maybe on that? And then any resources that you'd recommend?
For the 800 to 1,000 would be like total. That's, so for us personally, it was around 600 to 800 where we got to like a break even point where it was, and I think that was over the course of maybe 3 months, 4 months, where it was like, okay, now we've got some legs. Now now when I run ads, what I'm spending on them, I'm either profitable or at least break even as I'm kind of, month to month. And then eventually we're able to get profitable all the time. Now, as far as testing, so testing, you don't always have to be testing, but if you're trying something new. So an example would be like, I want to do I have this new, for us, we sell baby clothing. I have this new outfit that I'm excited about. I think it'll do well. So I'm gonna create an ad for it. And should I do this type of ad or this type of ad? And you just run them side by side and see which one performs. And then as you've done more and more over time, what would be successful compared to other things you've done in the past. So I can run an ad for a new outfit, and I can know within 3 days if that outfit is a winner or not. And so another tip I would give is don't assume you know anything, because you'll be surprised. And I've heard this in industry too, and I certainly experienced it. This is gonna crush, and it does horrible. And then this is like, I don't know, I'm just throwing something on the wall because I feel like doing some work today. And Lauren and I would look at each other like, this is a hit. Like, can you believe this is, you just never know. I mean, I remember creatives that I spent hours perfecting and I was so jacked about and like emotionally invested in and ran it. And after 3 days, every bit of data said, this is a loser. And I kept it going because I was just like, oh no, I'm going to run it a couple more days. And the data was telling me everything I needed to know. And it shocked me because I spent more time on that than I spent on other ads that did great. And so, I mean, you will learn things as you go, but don't assume you know. Just test and let the data tell you whether it's right or wrong. But it takes time to even know how to decipher the data. So an example would be like if you're new to watching football and you hear that a guy ran for 100 yards in a football game, like, is that good or bad? Well, you don't know until you've got something to compare it to over time. And then you realize like, oh, that's pretty good, but people do it all the time. But if someone ran for 200 yards in a game, that's only happened a handful of times in history. But they don't seem that different if you're brand new to football. But when you know the sport, you're like, that's a massive difference, 100, 200 yards.
That's excellent. That's great. And then resources?
Oh, resources. So there's a ton of free content on YouTube. Okay. I don't have anyone specific. And my advice on that is, so there's a lot of content you can pay for. I would not do that initially. I would start with free content, and I would take content from lots of different sources because within the industry, there's also a lot of people that maybe are feel very strong about one thing, but then there's also people that are equally successful that feel very strong about something very different, and both are right, and you don't know which one's right for you. So I'd be careful listening to like one person. I'd want to listen to 2, 3, 4, 5 people. An example would be like targeting. There's people that think you want to laser target. You want to get down to like an audience of 200,000 people. And just those are the perfect people. Then there's other people that will say, I want an audience of 4 million, and I'm gonna let Facebook find the best ones in that 4 million. And then there's, there's just a variety of opinion on that. But if you only listen to one, you might only be running these super tight laser targeted audiences and wondering why you can't, you're struggling. But if you knew, like, oh, some people recommend larger, some people recommend smaller, so I'm going to try both and then see which one's right for me. So really my only tip on resources is take from a lot, because there's a lot of different opinion and they're all right. It's just what works for one industry or business or audience maybe doesn't work quite as well for another.
Got it. That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you guys, man. Totally appreciate it. Great to see you all. Have a super duper day. You guys rock like ZZ Top. We'll see you. Hugs to the families, both you guys.
Thanks, Noble. See you.